Okay, Kaiser kids, here's our favorite chart. You love seeing this one of the explorers in the Americas in the 1500s. We've talked about this a lot in class, but you see that the Spanish are taking a lot of the land from the natives, and the English and the French are involved as well. So just a little bit of review of that. Keep that in your brain. Some other things we've talked about in class, how the Spanish conquistadors would conquer. So this one showing us, a slide is showing us that Cortez conquered Mexico. So the mighty Aztec Empire had no chance really against the Spanish weapons, horses, and diseases. So Cortez is in Mexico. We're reviewing this. We talked about this in class, so this is a review. Pizarro is the Spanish conquistador in South America. Will conquer the mighty Incan Empire. And we also talked about Ponce de Leon, the Spanish conquistador who would explore the Caribbean and lots of Florida and would start St. Augustine. St. Augustine being the oldest and first European city in America. So by the time we get to the 1600s, this is what the New World, North America, looks like. You can see that it's being divided up between the European powers, the Spanish, the French, the English, and a little bit of the Dutch are taking tons of land and claiming it for themselves. And all of this serves to make the mother country rich. So all of the yellow, the New Spain territory, serves to make Spain rich. France will claim a huge chunk. That will make France rich. We'll talk more about this map in a moment. And in class this week, and I guess now on this video, we're going to talk more about the back and forth of ships going across the Atlantic Ocean. So if you look at this slide, this is called the triangular trade because of the triangle it makes. But raw materials like sugar and tobacco, cotton come from the New World over to Europe, where that's turned into blankets and rum and other manufactured goods, because that's where all the factories were. So in London, for example, they might take the cotton that was grown in the Americas and turn that into a blanket. And that would be loaded upon a ship, taken down to maybe Africa, where that might be sold. And now the ships are empty. And upon those ships, going to the New World, would be humans. So the middle passage, as we'll talk about in class, is really the tragic part of all of this, because people are going to be brought against their will to the Americas to do all the work. And these slaves were going to have to lay down, getting up only a few times a day to really stretch their muscles. But for the most part, are going to make this voyage laying down and would have to lay that way while the entire passage across the Atlantic. And once they arrive in the New World, they will be taken off the ship, sold, and then be forced to work in sugar or cotton, or work on those plantations and grow things to go put those, say, more sugar back on empty boats and back to Europe. So they would do all the work and sugar, tobacco, cotton on the boat. So they do all the working on this in the Americas to load the boats back to Europe. So just a terrible part of history during this time period. And of course, millions of slaves will be brought to the New World, to the Americas, and many of them will wind up in America and will help build the United States. But it's not all the Spanish. There are a lot of French people exploring, famous explorers claiming land in North America for the French. So just to make sure you know this, when you see this red, white, and blue flag, that is the French, modern-day French flag. But whenever you see the little yellow flowers on flags, that's telling us that it's the French as well. They were into the lily, and that is a lily flower. So whenever you see it, you know it has a French connection. Like New Orleans, that's on the Saints, have that on their helmet. It's because that's a French city. Some famous explorers for France, Jacques Cartier, one of our first ones we have to know, explored in 1534. Everybody was looking for a better way to get to India and Asia, and they were looking for a Northwest Passage. And Cartier was looking for the French, but he never really found it. But what he will find, which will make him happy, is lots and lots of land that he can claim for the French, and a rodent that's actually quite large. You guys know the beaver, right? You've probably seen it at the zoo. And the Europeans will just love the fur. It is waterproof. and will keep you warm, and the people in Europe needed something to keep them warm. So while Cartier didn't find gold, he will find lots of land, lots of raw materials, and the beaver, which will continue to make France rich. So Cartier. Another French explorer who's famous is Samuel de Champlain. He's going to be around in Canada and what would be the United States, parts of the United States, and will start the first permanent New France settlement called Quebec City on the St. Lawrence River in 1608. So Quebec is still a very famous city in Canada today, and it was started by Champlain. And I'll go back a few slides here. You could see in the green in New France, way up there in the upper right, is Quebec. That's the city he started on that river, the St. Lawrence River. So Quebec and then later Montreal, these are important cities that would be established by French explorers. Let's get back to where we were. So Samuel de Champlain, 1608. Another really important French explorer is Lasalle. And he's going to be more in the United States. So he's actually going to claim the Mississippi River and the western land right near it. And he's going to name that Louisiana Territory, named after the French king. So this is all going to be part of New France, but Louisiana Territory is a certain part of New France. And we'll have to know that this year as well. So LaSalle, Champlain, and Cartier are big French explorers. But they're not the only ones. The English are going to get involved. So I get this question a lot. When did the English start? Colonies in the New World. And they're not far behind. In fact, they're right along with the French. So maybe you've heard of the lost colony of Roanoke. That's going to be the first attempt by the English to get a colony going. It would be in modern day North Carolina. But we don't know really what happened to those people that started the colony in 1587. They could have all died from diseases. They could have been killed by natives. There could have been a hurricane that wiped them out. We just don't know. There's a good chance they were just assimilated or joined an Indian tribe and became part of the native group. But we don't know. But that was the first try. So Sir Walter Raleigh started that in 1587, and that's in North Carolina. That's why Raleigh, North Carolina, is the capital of North Carolina. The English real significant second try that's permanent is Jamestown. Jamestown is in Virginia, and you might have learned about that in elementary school. And you might remember names like John Smith and Pocahontas. These are all part of that first permanent English settlement in Jamestown, Virginia. But you should get out of your head the whole John Smith, Pocahontas Disney lie, because nothing true about that. Other than there was a John Smith and there was a Pocahontas. So let's talk about Jamestown in 1607. 1607 was started to make money, right? It was a company, the Virginia Company. People in England invested money, hoping that these people who were on the boats would arrive in the New World, find gold, and make themselves rich, and make the company rich, and make England rich. So the king, King James, gave a charter, which is a fancy piece of paper, saying, hey, go under my name, and you can go start a business, try to find gold, do whatever. It's all my land anyway. I claimed it. Go do it. So John Smith, from like the Pocahontas cartoon, John Smith does help get Jamestown started. But he's not going to have really any contact with Pocahontas. She's not going to marry him. A lot of things Disney does is just for fun and semi-historically accurate. And of course, Pocahontas isn't a mermaid either. But John Smith will help keep Jamestown alive until John Rolfe arrives. John Rolfe. And he does marry Pocahontas. And he does bring with him some tobacco seeds. Because Jamestown was barely hanging on. Just barely hanging on. It was almost starving to death. But John Rolfe brings some tobacco seeds with him, and Jamestown is able to survive. They are able to sell their tobacco. It grows really well in that part of the world, and they make tons of money off of it. It saves this English settlement. So much so that Jamestown begins to grow, and they basically say, hey, we need kind of a representative government over here. The king is so far away. King James is so far away. So the king allows them to create a House of Burgesses, which is the first representative assembly in the American colonies. They're not in charge, of course. The king ultimately is in charge, but he is thousands of miles away. So they are there to make the decisions for the day-to-day, but with ultimately the king having the final decisions. It's kind of like student council here at school, right? You can meet, you can decide things, but in the end, the principal is still the boss. And of course, Jamestown is going to need slaves because who's going to grow all this tobacco? So they're going to need slaves brought over to do that. Again, against their will, like in that triangular trade that I was just showing you, that middle passage where the cargo is human, like we saw a few slides back. Not only that, but they're also going to have people come from England who don't have enough money to pay for the boat ticket over, but will agree to work for someone who does buy their ticket. I'll buy your ticket basically if you come work for me for 7 years. So in Jamestown, we have African slaves who have really no chance of freedom, no rights whatsoever. And then people who basically will work. These are white English folks who will work and maybe have a chance to be free at some point. But again, they're not slaves. They're probably treated pretty well. They just can't go anywhere. They're tied to the job until the time, 7 years or whatever, expires. So Jamestown is up and running. It will turn things around for the English. It will be their first permanent English settlement in the New World. So that brings us to our mini quiz on Friday over the Spanish, English, and French. It will be it will be over these slides and only these slides. So watch this video again and again if you need to, but every run from Cortez to Cartier, Jamestown, John Rolfe, Pocahontas, all of that, everybody in this video, all the slides are fair game for the quiz. But the quiz will only be over these slides.